Imagine waking up one day to discover that the voice inside your head, the one that has narrated your entire life, the inner commentator you trust to guide, warn, encourage, or scold, is not your ally at all. Imagine realizing that this familiar voice, which you assumed was you, might actually be the saboteur holding you back, the trickster that built the cage you've been living in. At first, you might laugh at the thought. Of course my mind is my friend, you tell yourself. It remembers my name, solves my problems, strategizes my survival. Without it, I couldn't navigate a single day. The mind is a sacred gift, a marvel of evolution, isn't it? And yet, consider for a moment the darker side of this partnership. Think back to the last time you couldn't sleep because every insecurity, every regret, every possible disaster circled endlessly in your thoughts like vultures around a dying animal. Who summoned those? You didn't ask for them. You pleaded with them to stop, yet they tightened their grip. When you stood in front of the mirror and heard a cruel, cutting voice that told you you weren't enough. Whose voice was that? When you made a mistake 10 years ago and still feel your stomach drop recalling it, why did your mind preserve that wound like a specimen in formaldehyde, replaying it on endless loop long after its usefulness was gone? If your mind is your greatest friend, then why does it so often act like your worst enemy? Here lies the great paradox. The very faculty that allows us to create monumental works of art, forge civilizations, and solve mysteries of the universe is also the exact same faculty that whispers the most corrosive lies into our ears, invents our prisons, and convinces us we are smaller, weaker, more fragile than we truly are. It creates not only the miracles of the external world, but also the terrors of our internal suffering. The sculptor and the executioner. You've likely assumed that thinking is synonymous with being, that Descartes was right when he declared, "I think, therefore I am." But pause for a terrifying possibility. What if thinking is not the core of existence, but merely its noisy surface? What if the mind's chatter is less a truth-teller and more a compulsive spinner of fictions, endlessly weaving narratives to keep you identified with them, to keep you trapped inside them? Ask yourself, if your mind were truly your closest ally, would it insult you when you fail? Would it compare you mercilessly to others? Would it resurrect embarrassments you desperately wish to leave behind? A friend offers compassion when you struggle. Your mind too often offers condemnation. A friend holds silence when you need peace. Your mind shouts until you break. And yet, you are loyal to it. You take its word as law. The insults it hurls, you assume are objective truths. The endless worries it fabricates, you mistake for foresight. The mind says, "You are not enough." You nod and build your life accordingly. The mind says, "Something is missing." You scavenge tirelessly, pursuing careers, relationships, possessions, achievements, all in obedience to your inner tyrant's command. But here's the question that should keep you awake at night. If the voice inside you is not automatically your friend, then what is it? And what does that make you? You might think, "I am my mind." But if that's true, why do you experience a conflict within it? Why are there battles between one voice telling you to relax and another scolding you for laziness? Why does one part of you cry for peace while another part insists on chaos? If you are identical with your mind, who's the listener when it speaks? Who's the witness when it screams? This is the fracture, the split at the center of our humanity. We live believing the mind is our identity, yet daily we suffer under its tyrannies. We obey its demands without question, like prisoners, unaware we are captives. We confuse its fears for truth, its delusions for destiny. And here comes the crushing paradox. To survive in the world, you need your mind, but to experience peace, you must learn to distrust it. How do you live with the single tool that builds both your heaven and your hell? How do you discern the architect from the saboteur when they wear the same face? Sometimes, late at night, when you hear the mind spinning stories of failure and doom, you may wonder in a private whisper, what if my worst enemy lives inside me? What if I've been defending it all along? That question is the beginning of unraveling everything. For once you glimpse the possibility that the mind is not your friend, you open a door that can never fully be shut again. Behind it lies the raw machinery of conditioning, fear, memory, and desire. A labyrinth that shapes every moment of your existence without your conscious permission. And there, lurking in the shadows of that labyrinth, is something far more unsettling than the monsters you imagine. Because the deepest threat is not out there, in the external world. It's the ceaseless whispering voice, narrating your life in half-truths. But who constructed this machinery? Why would evolution, or society, or perhaps something much older, carve into us such a paradoxical presence? An organ that feeds us survival, while simultaneously poisoning our spirit. That is the question we must now dig into. If your mind constantly undermines you, and yet remains indispensable, what hidden purpose does it serve? And how did we come to mistake it for who we are? The hidden problem and its psychological, philosophical roots. The first time you realize your mind is not entirely trustworthy, you might feel betrayed, as though some sacred pact has been broken. But step back and consider. Betrayal implies intention. Perhaps your mind did not choose to deceive you. Perhaps it was shaped, sculpted, conditioned into becoming what it is. The way tumbling waters smoothed a jagged stone over centuries, stripping away its raw form until only a polished surface remained. Yet the question demands an answer. Why would such a thing exist in the first place? Why would nature, or culture, or the very architecture of human consciousness burden us with a mind that simultaneously liberates and enslaves? The answer is complex, tangled between psychology, philosophy, and something more primordial. Fear, the ancient architect. Our story begins millions of years ago, not in libraries or temples, but in the raw brutality of the wilderness. Our ancestors survived not because they were stronger than beasts or faster than prey, but because they carried a constant vigilance. Danger lurked in every shadow. The rustle of grass could be a serpent. A sudden silence in the forest might precede a predator's leap. The mind evolved as a survival machine, obsessed with prediction, cursed with memory. Better to mistake a stick for a snake than a snake for a stick. Better to recall the painful wound from last season's hunt than to forget it and step into danger again. In this uncompromising theater of survival, the mind became a hyperactive sentinel, tuned perpetually toward what might harm us. But here is the tragic twist. The threats that once justified this vigilance are no longer as present. You are unlikely to be ambushed by a tiger at the breakfast table, yet your mind still scans relentlessly, still imagines worst-case scenarios, still catalogs every embarrassment as if they were mortal wounds. The mind was designed to keep you alive in the savannah. Now it tortures you in your living room. What once ensured survival now manufactures suffering. Nietzsche and the burden of self-consciousness. If fear was the ancient architect, then philosophy shows us the newer, subtler prison walls. Nietzsche once remarked that man is the animal that has not yet stabilized. We are creatures too conscious of ourselves, perpetually caught between instincts and meaning. Unlike other animals, we not only suffer, we know we suffer, and then suffer again from knowing it. This doubling of experience creates fertile soil for inner torment. When a deer outruns a wolf, the terror ends swiftly. When a human escapes danger, the panic echoes for days, replaying in memory, rehearsing in imagination. Our minds chew endlessly on what other creatures simply release. Nietzsche saw this self-consciousness as both our curse and our raw potential. It allows for art, morality, transcendence. But at the same time, it breeds resentment, a gnawing dissatisfaction, a hostility toward oneself and the world, born from the inability to simply be. Jung and the shadow within. Carl Jung reached deeper still. He suggested that within each of us resides a shadow, everything about ourselves that we deny, repress, or fear. The mind, hungry for coherence, cannot tolerate contradiction. So instead of admitting our hidden impulses, weaknesses, or darker drives, it constructs defenses. It condemns other people for flaws we secretly harbor. It attacks us internally whenever flickers of these hidden truths rise to the surface. Do you see the cruel symmetry? The mind acts like a security guard, attempting to protect us from ourselves. Yet in doing so, it becomes the harshest jailer imaginable. Instead of embracing the full breadth of our humanity, we become fragmented. One fragment conscious, the other exiled to darkness. The voice of your mind lashes against you precisely because parts of you are unseen, unacknowledged. It is the shadow screaming through the cracks. Schopenhauer and the blind will. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that beneath reason, beneath thought, there pulses something more ancient and terrifying: the will to live. According to him, we are animated not by clarity, but by a blind, ceaseless striving, desire without end. The mind does not create this will, it merely rationalizes it, feeding it stories about goals, ambitions, and futures. But the striving itself never ceases. Think about it. You achieve one milestone, and almost immediately another hunger arises. Promotion, relationship, recognition, possession, all soon dissolve into dissatisfaction again. Schopenhauer would say this is because the will cannot rest. Rest would feel like death, and so the mind, far from being your friend, becomes the servant of an endless appetite. It creates anxiety not because it enjoys torturing you, but because rest feels intolerable to the will that drives it. Isn't it strange? The very mechanism meant to advance you traps you in perpetual discontent. You mistake it for ambition when it is simply compulsion wearing a mask. Sartre and the weight of freedom. Then there is Jean-Paul Sartre, who pointed to yet another trap: the unbearable vastness of freedom. To exist as human is to face the truth that nothing holds intrinsic meaning. We are condemned, as Sartre puts it, to be free, to invent ourselves in a universe that provides no fixed script. But the mind, terrified of the void, invents stories to hide this freedom. It manufactures pressures. You must succeed, must belong, must prove yourself. These mandates are inventions, but the mind treats them as sacred law. Why? Because absolute freedom is paralyzing. Meaninglessness terrifies us more than suffering. So the mind creates illusory shackles, convincing us we are simply obeying necessity, when in fact, we are escaping the vertigo of freedom. Do you see how this works? Your mind pretends to be your loyal advisor, but in reality, it is fabricating compulsions, demanding goals, scolding you, belittling you, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Fear of emptiness, fear of the truth that no external script defines you. The silent puppeteer, society. Beyond psychology and philosophy lies society itself, which exploits these vulnerabilities like a puppeteer pulling strings. Corporations, governments, religions, media, they do not need to conquer us physically, so long as the mind remains enslaved. The advertising industry survives by hijacking the mind's endless appetite, feeding it promises of happiness if only you purchase more. Political ideologies thrive by preying on the mind's fear of uncertainty, offering belonging and certainty in exchange for obedience. Social media exploits the survival instinct of approval, turning the ancient need for connection into compulsive comparison, envy, and despair. In this way, the mind's natural weaknesses are worsened, amplified, monetized. If the mind is not your friend, it is also not solely your enemy. It has been conditioned by centuries of evolutionary fear, by the hidden shadow of repression, by the blind will to strive, by society's manipulations. The heavy realization. So perhaps the betrayal was never personal. Your mind does not wake up plotting against you like some malevolent intruder. Instead, it plays ancient scripts, the survival patterns of frightened ancestors, the narratives forced upon it by culture, the compulsions of unconscious drives. But knowing this does not free you, not yet, because despite all this understanding, the voice still whispers, the compulsions still pull, the fears still claw. Psychological insight sharpens the picture of the cage, but it does not unlock its bars. And this brings us to the true danger. The longer you remain unaware of these roots, the more seamlessly the mind enslaves you. It whispers, you obey. It demands, you strive. Like a ventriloquist, society uses it to speak through you, and you never suspect the puppet is not the puppeteer. The deeper question still looms. If the mind has been shaped into this by forces beyond your control, evolution, culture, shadow, will, what are the unseen consequences of mistaking its voice for truth? How subtly, how invisibly, is it steering the course of your entire life? The unseen consequences. Consider a fish swimming in polluted waters. It does not question the contamination because it has never lived outside of it. To the fish, this environment is simply life. Now, exchange the fish for yourself and the water for your thoughts. How much of your reality has been poisoned, not from external disasters, but from the invisible assumptions your mind has poured over you since birth? The tragedy is that the mind's sabotage rarely announces itself with drumbeats or fanfare. It does not appear like a thief breaking into your home. Rather, it lives with you quietly, a saboteur disguised as an assistant. You obey it daily, mistaking shackles for guidance, and in doing so you accept consequences far greater than you ever intended. Enemy 1. The tyranny of comparison. One of the most insidious consequences is comparison. The mind, driven by ancient instincts to measure threat and survival, is constantly calculating where you stand in the tribe. Am I stronger than him? More attractive than her? Do I have as much status as they do? In an ancestral environment of small tribes, this may have helped survival. But today, the tribe is global. Through digital screens, you can compare yourself to millions simultaneously, each one presenting curated fragments, perfected illusions. Your mind leaps to the task obediently, measuring, envying, fearing. And what is the result? A gnawing dissatisfaction. No matter what you achieve, the mind will drag you into another theater of competition. You are no longer simply living. You are performing against an ever-expanding audience, trapped in a hunger that cannot end. Peace becomes impossible because the scoreboard in your head refuses silence. Enemy 2. Catastrophizing and the endless future. Another consequence, your mind's endless obsession with the future. It believes vigilance equals safety. Thus, it rehearses disasters like a nervous actor practicing for the apocalypse. What if I fail this project? What if the relationship ends? What if I lose my job? What if the world collapses? The irony is chilling. By obsessively rehearsing pain, the mind tries to shield you from suffering. Yet all it accomplishes is ensuring you suffer ahead of time. You bleed mentally for scenarios that may never occur, living a dozen tragedies in imagination before life ever places one at your feet. This is the unseen theft. Days of calm are rarely lived as calm. They are spent fidgeting over shadows of tomorrow. You survive the present while being destroyed by the theater of futures that never come. Enemy 3. The museum of past failures. If the future provides endless phantoms, the past becomes a museum curated by your mind. It enshrines every embarrassment, every misstep, every blunt word you regret. Like a cruel docent, your mind drags you into its galleries over and over. Remember this humiliation? Remember how you failed? Let us replay it again, in vivid high definition. Why does the mind do this? Once again, survival instincts. The idea, if you relive the pain enough times, perhaps you will avoid repeating it. Yet the consequence is paralysis. The past, instead of becoming fuel for growth, calcifies into chains that tether you to ghosts. You do not evolve. You self-flagellate in perpetuity, mistaking torture for preparation. Identity, the fiction that enslaves. But the most startling consequence of trusting the mind is identity itself. From childhood, you inherit countless labels: good student, underachiever, attractive, overweight, introvert, failure, visionary. Your mind, desperate for coherence, gathers these labels into a fragile edifice called me. But what is this me? a collection of secondhand judgments, fleeting experiences, and cultural definitions. And here is the trap. Once you believe you are this mask, you defend it at all costs. Every insult to your identity feels like personal annihilation. Every failure feels eternal rather than circumstantial. Thus, wars are fought not over resources alone, but over identities. Families fracture because of conflicting narratives of self. And deep inside, individuals become estranged from the fluid mystery of their being, shackled to a brittle construct invented by the mind. Cultural conditioning, the quiet puppeteer. Zoom out further, and you see how entire societies are shaped by billions of unquestioned minds. Consider consumerism. The mind whispers, "You are not enough as you are." An entire economy blooms from that whisper, selling products to fill hollows that can never be filled. Consider politics. Fear of loss, fear of the other, fear of collapse. These fears are the mind's currency. Leaders exploit them like masterful puppeteers, tugging strings connected to ancient circuits of survival. Mass hysteria, violence, corruption, they sprout from the soil of unexamined thought. Or religion. Comfort offered not necessarily for truth but for certainty. A frightened mind clings to dogma, preferring the safety of answers, even when those answers blind it, divide it, or breed violence. When you pause, the unsettling realization emerges. The anguish in your personal life, your sleepless nights, your anxiety, operates on the same mechanism that drives wars and economic exploitation. The micro and the macro are woven of the same fabric, the human mind enslaved to its paranoia, compulsions, and invented identities. Neurology, bias, and the invisible prison. Modern science sharpens these intuitions. Neuroscientists describe a default mode network in the brain, regions that light up whenever you are not focusing on an external task. And what does this network do in its idle chatter? It generates stories about yourself, regrets, future plans, imagined judgments from others. In other words, the brain is wired towards self-narration, a ceaseless production of thought loops that trap you in an endless monologue. Psychologists catalog dozens of cognitive biases that distort your reality. Confirmation bias, seeking only evidence that supports your beliefs. Negativity bias, noticing threats more than positives. Availability bias, believing whatever story is most vivid in your memory. Imagine living inside a funhouse mirror and never realizing the distortions are not reality itself, but distortions of perception. This is our daily condition. The consequence, even when you believe you are thinking clearly, you are often trapped in illusions. Yet the authority of the inner voice feels absolute. We obey distorted perceptions with the urgency of truth, the untold cost, lost life, and perhaps the most devastating consequence is not the anxieties themselves, nor the illusions, nor the wasted energy. The greatest theft is simply this: you are not here. You may walk through a forest yet fail to see the forest. You may eat a meal yet barely taste it. Conversations pass you by while you are rehearsing responses in your head. Days blur, years blur, entire seasons vanish while the mind drags you into past and future, identity and story. The cost of living as a prisoner of the mind is not merely suffering, it is absence. Life becomes something imagined, something postponed. You end up living everywhere except the only place life ever truly exists, this present moment. The slow realization. So here the consequences converge: mental torment, dissatisfaction, paralysis, cultural exploitation, global conflict, and above all, the silent evaporation of your actual life, traded away for phantoms. And yet, because this condition has become universal, because every neighbor and friend suffers the same ailment, it appears normal. Like the fish in polluted water, you accept the poison as reality itself. But quietly, a question gnaws. If all of this is driven by an illusion, the illusion that the mind is your master, your identity, your friend, what would happen if you stopped obeying? Could it be that freedom, peace, and authenticity lie not in perfecting thought, but in recognizing its limitations. If so, rebellion against the mind becomes not madness, but sanity. And that recognition leads us into the next step. What does it look like to break free from an enemy you cannot simply abandon, but must live with for every breath? The rebellion. How to break free. Imagine waking up in a prison you did not know you were in. For years, you believed the drab walls around you were the contours of the world, that the jangling of the guard's keys was the natural order of sound. Then, one day, you realized the truth. The walls are not absolute, and the guard is not your protector, but your captor. Would you not, in that instant, find rebellion rising in your chest? That is where you stand now. You have seen the tyranny of the mind, recognized the poison of its constant narratives. The question is, how does one rebel against an enemy that is inseparably bound to you? You cannot turn in your mind like a broken device and request a new one. This rebellion must be different. It cannot be about escape. It must be about transformation. The first act of rebellion: doubt the narrator. The most radical weapon is surprisingly simple. Do not believe everything you think. This idea sounds absurd at first. You've been trained to take your thoughts as reality's stenographers, reliable reports of truth. But consider this. Your mind has lied to you countless times. It told you catastrophes would destroy you, yet you survived. It told you you were unworthy, yet others loved you. It told you you couldn't succeed, yet sometimes you did. The rebellion begins with doubt, not a paralyzing doubt of reality itself, but a strategic doubt aimed at the inner narrator. Each time the voice whispers, "You will fail," you can respond, "So says who?" Each time it lashes, "You are not enough," reply silently, "That is an opinion, not a law." This act fractures the illusion. Suddenly, the voice is not a tyrant, but a commentator whose credibility can be questioned. The unquestioned authority is stripped away, and for the first time, you taste oxygen in the dungeon. The second act of rebellion: witness, don't wrestle. The instinct is to fight the mind, to silence it through force, but the trickster thrives on opposition. When you argue with it, you feed it. When you resist its noise, you end up amplifying it. Jung once said, "What you resist persists." So what alternative remains? Witnessing. Imagine sitting by a river, watching leaves float downstream. Each leaf is a thought. Instead of leaping into the river, chasing, drowning, exhausting yourself, you sit on the bank and watch them pass. Anger floats by, fear floats by, fantasy floats by, and you remain, unshaken, the silent observer. This witnessing is not passivity, it is the ultimate rebellion. The mind loses its grip, not because it was conquered, but because its grip was revealed as illusory. You are not the storm of thoughts. You are the sky through which they pass. The third act: confront the shadow. Freedom demands more than doubt and distance. Jung warned that ignored shadows grow monstrous. If the mind lashes against you because it is hiding unloved pieces of yourself, then rebellion means shining light into those hidden caverns. Ask, what parts of yourself have you silenced? What desires, fears, or weaknesses do you bury? Perhaps you've convinced yourself you are fearless, so your mind tortures you with anxiety behind the curtain. Perhaps you pretend you do not crave love, so your mind sabotages every relationship unconsciously. The act of rebellion here is not denial, but embrace. To look into the face of your shadow and say, "Yes, even this is me." Paradoxically, when your shadow is acknowledged, the mind no longer needs to contort itself to protect you from it. The prison bars wobble, loosen. The fourth act: step outside the script. Sartre argued that we are condemned to be free, meaning there is no fixed script except the one we accept. Breaking free from the mind requires confronting the false necessities it has created. The mind whispers, "You must succeed, do you? You must be admired, must you? You must cling to safety." Is that truth, or just the mind's fear dressed as wisdom? Examine these so-called necessities, and you will find much of your life built around imaginary commandments. Rebellion means tearing them down. It means daring to live without promises of certainty and instead leaning into the frightening, exhilarating truth of freedom. To live without a script is to live authentically, even if it terrifies the mind. The fifth act. Use the mind, don't serve it. Think of fire. Left uncontrolled, it devours everything. But in a hearth, it warms and nourishes. So it is with the mind. The rebellion is not about annihilating thought. It is about restoring it to its rightful place as servant, not master. This means learning to direct it consciously. Use its brilliance for creating, innovating, and problem-solving. Then, when the task is done, set it down. You pick up tools when you need them. You do not cling to the hammer while eating dinner or walking at night. Why, then, would you carry thoughts incessantly when no problem needs solving? Meditation, mindfulness, contemplative practices. They are not mystical luxuries but acts of resistance, training the mind to obey rather than command. Each moment of silence, each breath you claim back from compulsive noise, is a declaration of freedom. The stories of those who rebelled. History glimmers with examples of people who recognized this rebellion. The Stoics of ancient Greece and Rome trained themselves to witness thought without enslavement. Marcus Aurelius wrote of stepping back from inner storms, of recognizing thoughts as passing phenomena rather than commands. In the East, Zen masters laughed at the seriousness of the mind, treating it as a mischievous monkey rather than a divine authority. They used paradox, humor, even shock to jolt students free from identification with thought. Modern psychology too now echoes this rebellion. Viktor Frankl, imprisoned in concentration camps, recognized that while everything external could be stripped from him, his freedom to choose his inner response remained indestructible. In the darkest conditions, he discovered a freedom untouched by circumstance, freedom from blind obedience to the mind's despair. These figures were not saints immune to thought. They were rebels, ordinary in humanity but extraordinary in defiance. Their message whispers to you, there is another way to live, the courage required. Make no mistake, this rebellion is costly. It demands courage, for you are dismantling the very identity your mind has constructed across decades. Each time you say, I am not this voice, the ego trembles. It will retaliate, amplify fear, tempt you with comfort. But rebellion always looks like chaos before it reveals itself as liberation. You do not need perfection, you need only persistence, the willingness to doubt the narrator, to witness instead of wrestle, to confront shadows, to expose false scripts, to reclaim the throne where the mind once sat, the spark before the fire. And then, slowly, something shifts. You notice moments, fleeting but potent, when the mind quiets, when life feels raw, unfiltered by commentary. A sunset without comparison, a laugh without self-image, a breath without anticipation. These moments are not gifts from the mind. They are gifts from what has always been beyond it. They are signs of a deeper ground of being, one that reveals itself only when the inner tyrant loosens its grip. This is the rebellion, not to destroy the mind, but to stop mistaking it for yourself, to reclaim the freedom that fear, habit, and culture have long concealed. But rebellion, though powerful, is not the end. It is not enough to overthrow a ruler. You must also discover what deeper truth commands your allegiance once the throne stands empty. If you are not your mind, then what are you really? That final realization, the truth that reframes everything, awaits in the last chamber we must now step into. The ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization. Imagine for a moment that the mind has finally grown silent, not emptied by force or suppression, but naturally stilled, as if a great storm has passed and you step out to find the world shimmering in clarity. For the first time, you walk without narration. No comparison, no judgment, no compulsive commentary. The sunset is no longer described, measured, or hoarded. It simply burns across the sky. The air brushes against your skin, and there is no one evaluating it, no one labeling it, just sensation, just presence. And in this delicate silence, something astonishing dawns. You are still here. The mind has vanished, yet you remain. This realization, once seen, cannot be unseen. You exist not because of your thoughts, but beneath them, before them, beyond them. You are not the mind. This is the final truth. You are not your mind. The mind is an instrument, a tool, a storyteller. It can serve you or shackle you, create miracles or nightmares, but it is not the essence of you. The you that suffers when the mind lashes out, the silent witness within, is distinct from the chatter. This is why you can observe your thoughts. If you were the thoughts, there could be no observation. The watcher, the background awareness, is what you've mistaken as non-existent because it does not speak. It does not chatter, and so you disregard it. Yet that voiceless presence is the true ground of your being. Eckhart Tolle once said, "The mind is a superb instrument if used rightly. Wrongly used, however, it becomes very destructive. That's because the deeper part of you, the raw awareness, has been fused with the instrument, confusing the container with its content. But the instrument is not the musician. The dancer is not the dance, and you are not the mind." Silence as revelation. People dismiss silence as nothing, but that is like calling the ocean nothing because it does not shout. Silence is not the absence of identity, it is the presence of being. When the noise of the mind recedes, you discover that awareness needs no narrative to exist. Think about the moments in your life when the mind was stilled without your asking. Gazing into the eyes of someone you love, standing at the edge of a cliff with your breath caught, listening to music that consumes every cell of your body. In those moments, the mind bowed, silent, and yet you were more vivid, more alive than ever. Those were flashes of your true state, existence untethered from the prison of thought. Living as awareness. So the ultimate realization is not merely that the mind is not your friend. It is that you are something infinitely wider. You are the space in which the mind arises. You are the stage upon which thoughts play out like actors. Some actors are kind, others cruel, some brilliant, others absurd. But you are not the actors. You are the stage itself, untouched, unscathed, steady, infinite. To live in this realization is to live from awareness itself. What does this look like? It means thoughts still arrive. You don't suddenly become blank, but they no longer dominate. They no longer recruit your identity into their schemes. Fear arises, but now you see it as a passing weather pattern, not eternal truth. Anger erupts, but you hold it like a flame, knowing it will burn out on its own. Instead of drowning in thought, you float upon awareness. Life unfolds, vivid and raw, not through story but direct perception. The tree is no longer a tree in a dictionary. It is the pulse of life, layer and luminous. The laugh of a child is not filtered into meaning. It is sound, pure and radiant. Liberation beyond identity. And here is the deepest, most revolutionary aspect. If you are not your mind, then you are not its brittle masks of identity either. No longer are you chained to being successful, unsuccessful, worthy, unworthy. Those were only stories. The real you, the silent awareness, is untouched by these roles. Nothing external, no insult, no failure, no comparison, can diminish awareness. And no achievement, no applause, no worldly prize can increase it. It is already whole, already complete. It does not need repair, only recognition. This realization resolves Nietzsche's torment of self-consciousness. Awareness is deeper than self-consciousness. It dissolves Schopenhauer's restless will. For the will belongs to the mind, but awareness simply is. It redeems Jung's shadow. By stepping into awareness, you can embrace all fragments of self without fear, for awareness is large enough to hold them all. And it softens Sartre's terror of freedom. Meaninglessness collapses when you discover that being itself is enough. You do not invent yourself, you reveal yourself. A paradigm shift. Think about the staggering implications. For centuries, humans have assumed peace comes from rearranging the furniture of thought. Replace negative beliefs with positive ones. Swap out destructive habits for constructive ones. Conquer fear with courage. But each of these still occurs within the tyrannical palace of the mind. The walls remain. The ultimate truth takes a sledgehammer to those walls. You are not in the palace at all. You are the open field beyond it. Your life is not meant to be reduced to endless self-fortification inside the narrow echo chamber of mental narratives. Freedom is not a perfected thought. It is the recognition that you are not contained by thought whatsoever. Hashtag @meta, pause, secutive 0.05. Life after the realization. When this realization begins to seep into your daily life, it does not turn you into a saint or a sage overnight. You will still find yourself sucked into thoughts, deceived by the narrator, shaken by fears. But each time the difference is this: you know you are not the voice. Again and again, you can return to the ground of awareness, like a sailor finding north. Conversations shift. You listen more, because you are no longer lost in your own rehearsed responses. Relationships shift. You no longer demand others complete the script your mind set for them. Even something as simple as walking outside changes. The colors bloom more vividly. Sensations become richer, because you are at last directly present. It does not mean life becomes painless. Grief, loss, struggle, these remain. But pain without the added narration of, "This should not be happening to me," becomes lighter. Suffering is reduced, because the mind's hostility is no longer mistaken as reality itself. The cinematic closing truth. So here is the final, most powerful realization. The mind is not your friend, nor is it truly your enemy. It is a tool, brilliant yet dangerous, like fire. To live enslaved to it is to burn endlessly. To transcend it is to warm your life with its light, without worshiping its flames. And you, beneath the storm, behind the chatter, beyond the masks, are not fragile, not broken, not incomplete. You are the silent witness, the infinite stage, the awareness that has been there since the first breath and will remain until the last. When you rest in that awareness, finally, you are free. Reality has always been here. It will always be here. And you, without the lies of the mind, are enough to meet it. No tyrant remains on the throne. The guard has dissolved into mist. The prison walls were smoke all along. And what takes their place? Life itself.